there! Someone recently asked me to talk about how to memorize song lyrics. Now, I have a background in the theater from high school, university, and also an amateur theater company. And so at one point in my life, memorization was a huge part of what I did on a daily basis. I used to be very good at memorizing really long scripts in a very short period of time. And at the time, I was also performing in several bands. And so whenever new songs came into the rotation, into our set list, I also had to learn those songs very quickly. And because I was keeping up with those skills with the theater stuff, I was able to memorize those song lyrics really, really easily, very, very quickly. However, I have since taken a very long break, an extended break from memorizing scripts and also learning new songs. So what I've found is that it's like any other skill, that if we don't keep up with it, we tend to sort of get a little bit rusty. But if we keep working at it, and if we keep practicing it, and also if we use certain tools to help us, we're going to become much, much better at it. So today I'm going to share with you some of the tools that I've used in the past, and also now as I'm starting to learn new songs again, to memorize song lyrics more effectively and a lot more quickly. Now, the first thing that I do when learning song lyrics is I listen to the original recordings. And I'm sure you've never thought to do any of that. Alright, so I listen to them, not necessarily to learn the lyrics per se, although the more I listen to it, the easier it is to learn the lyrics, of course, and the more readily I will learn the lyrics. But I listen to it because I want to learn the meter and I want to learn the phrasing, because that actually helps me. Having those beats, having those stresses on given syllables can actually help me in learning the song lyrics later on. Listening to and singing along to the original recording isn't necessarily the most effective way of memorizing song lyrics, and that's because those vocals that are already on the track are serving as prompts. So we're basically not actively engaged in song memorization when we're listening along to the original recording. Our minds are sort of passively engaged, and so we're using those prompts all the time as sort of a crutch, and we need to at some point remove that crutch. And so the next thing that I do, and it's partly because I want to engage my mind actively, and also partly because I'm a really visual learner, is I sit down and I write out the song lyrics, sometimes multiple times. Because when I'm actively engaged in that process, it engages my tactile senses, but it also engages my visual senses. Now I can actually see the words in front of me, and I've taken part in actively writing out those words. It's not the same as singing along to a karaoke track in which we actually see the words popping up, because again, those are prompts. And it's also not the same as reading a CD jacket or looking at the lyrics online. The more parts of your brain you engage and the more senses you engage, the easier it will be for you to memorize song lyrics, especially when they're complex or long. Now, for the most part, most song lyrics have a certain flow in which the themes or the ideas from one phrase flow very, very connectedly into the next phrase. But sometimes we encounter song lyrics that seem a little bit stream of consciousness, and the ideas just don't seem to be connected at all. They seem to be sort of all over the place. And that can make it really hard for us to memorize the song lyrics. A good example of this for me is a song that I'm just now starting to learn, I'm a little slow on the uptake, I guess, is How Far I'll Go from Moana. Now, some of the parts of the song are really easy for me to memorize, and I got them right away. But then there are these little sections, these little pre-chorus sections in particular, and also the chorus, in which some of the themes don't seem to flow entirely. In the case of the first pre-chorus, the themes are so similar, and so that can actually make it just as confusing as if they're completely disjointed. And so what I do, again, because I'm a very visual learner, is I develop mental images. So in my head, I get images, literal images, and I put those images in order, in a sequence, so that they help me to be able to memorize the song lyrics, the order in which those given words occur within the phrase, or within the verse or chorus. And then I begin to actively work on memorizing the song lyrics. So what I'll do is I'll take these images and these phrases and I'll put them together, but I will only start with one phrase at a time. I make sure that I get the meter and the rhythm right, because that again will help me a little bit in learning the actual words that I need to be singing. And so I put the first image there and make sure that I know that vocal phrase. And then I sing the next vocal phrase. But I don't just sing the entire song over and over and over again, hoping that something will stick along the way. Instead, I just sing one phrase at a time. I sing the first phrase when I'm confident that I know that phrase really well. Then I add the second phrase to it. And then I sing them back to back. I may do this repeatedly. I sing the first verse again because that's built-in repetition. That's built-in memorization. We need to just keep going over and over and over it. So we memorize in smaller chunks, all right? So first phrase connected to the second phrase. When we feel as though we've got those very confidently and very consistently, then we add the third phrase, and so forth. And we keep doing this until we're able to memorize the entire song. Now, sometimes what I will do is I will take an easier part first, and I will work on that. So sometimes it might be the chorus. Sometimes the chorus has that nice little hook, and sometimes it's memorable. Sometimes there are repetitive lyrics, and so it makes it even that much easier to memorize. And so I focus on that first. Instead of starting necessarily from the beginning of the first verse, I'll go to the chorus or whatever part I'm working on, and I'll memorize that first. And then I'll move on to the different parts. It doesn't necessarily have to be memorized in sequence, although that may be beneficial for some singers. And again, as I'm memorizing the song lyrics one phrase at a time, I'm putting those little mental images in sequence. And so as I'm looking ahead, what's the next phrase that I'm singing? I picture the next image. And that again helps me to memorize a sort of pattern in the lyrics. Now, sometimes those images are little pictures in my head, and sometimes they might be pictures from scenery or the movie in this case. So when I'm looking at the initial lyrics of this song, right, I've been staring at the edge of the water, right? So I'm actually picturing myself or the character staring at the edge of the water. Now, I think it's also important for us to remember that songs have context and stories. A couple years ago, I attended a masterclass taught by Andrew Lippa, and Andrew has written a number of musicals, including the Addams Family musical. And in this masterclass, he talked about how the story doesn't begin at the first phrase. The story doesn't begin when the music starts, the band begins to play. There's something that led up to that moment in which the song is being sung. And in musical theater, it's a lot easier for us to learn that story because there's a script and there's context and there are other songs. There's a whole storyline. Now, if you're singing pop or rock or another genre of music, it's not always so easy for us to find out what happened that led to that moment for the singer or for the composer. But we can certainly infer our ideas. We can certainly imagine what might have been going on in the composer's mind, or imagine a story that has led us to this point where we're feeling these feelings, where we're thinking these thoughts. And that can actually really help us to solidify those lyrics, because now what we're doing is we're personalizing it a little bit. Now we're kind of memorizing it in here, not just in here or visually. Now, another little theater trick is what we call running our lines Italian. When you do an Italian run-through, you're not actually speaking Italian. What you're doing is you're just sort of saying your lines super, super quickly. And it's just a way of ensuring that you know your lines inside out if you can say them that quickly. And it's also a way of just making sure that you know your cues, and it's a quick way of memorizing things and a quick way of rehearsing your lines. And we can also do the same thing with song lyrics. We can either take the lyrics and just run through them super, super quickly, or we can go back to using the rhythm and the meter and the phrasing and speak through the lines of the song and just keep that beat in there. And it seems like it's calling out to me, so come find me and let me know what's beyond that line. Will I cross that line? And again, using that rhythm and that meter and those phrases is actually a really helpful tool. In fact, that's my little one singing there. In fact, song lyrics and poetry are considered to be amongst the easiest things to memorize, and it's largely due to the fact that there is that rhythm and there is that rhyme. So take advantage of that. And so after I've memorized a section or two of the song, I then take it for a little bit of a test drive. So what I do is I will turn on a backing track, or I will turn on a karaoke track and just kind of turn away so that I'm not using those lyrics on the screen as a crutch. And I will begin to sing it. And by this point, I've already memorized the phrasing and the meter and the tempo of the song, and I've got a feel for how the song flows. So I know that certain words are elongated, certain words are shorter, some words are higher, some words are lower. And that's another thing that I do when I'm memorizing the melody, is I get these visual cues in my head where I actually picture the notes kind of going up and down, and I picture that movement of my voice. And that also helps, and I feel like sometimes it goes hand in hand, memorizing lyrics and memorizing melody. So sometimes it's a good idea not to try to separate the two for very long. If I find myself messing up the words, I don't just keep going for the rest of the song. I stop myself, I find out where I went wrong, I take a look at the lyrics on the page that I've written out, and I really, again, sort of reinforce those mental images that I've formed in my head, and I repeat it, and I make sure that I catch myself making those mistakes. Because if we make the same mistake over and over and over again in trying to learn a song, that actually kind of reinforces the mistake, instead of having us change how we approach that song and how we're thinking, how we're visualizing that vocal phrase. So we want to make sure that we actively catch ourselves making those mistakes and stop ourselves from making them in the future. And then from there, I simply repeat it over and over and over again. I wash, rinse, and repeat. And that helps to reinforce what I've learned. That helps to make it really stick in my head. Alright, so I hope that these memorization tools will be helpful for you in memorizing song lyrics. If you have any others that you use that you find to be really effective, please feel free to share them in the comment section below. And that way it will help our whole community here to do a much better job of memorizing their song lyrics. In the meantime, please like this video and also consider subscribing to this channel so that you'll be notified every time I post new videos. Thanks so much for watching.